Syncopated rhythms, electronic dreams. AI music is here.
Thanks, everybody. It's really exciting to have everyone here in person and online. I am TRISTRA YEAGER, and I have a very fancy title of Chief Strategy Officer at RockPaperScissors. I'm also the co-host of a podcast called Music Tectonics. So if you're interested in music and tech or the music business, you should definitely give our episodes a listen. But today, I am merely the facilitator of what should be a really fun conversation to kick off this Saturday. Namely, we're going to be talking about AI tools that empower artists as opposed to terrify them, replace them, or do something else to them that's unpleasant. So I want to make sure that everyone here has lots of time to explain who they are and what they do. And so I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves. We've got 5 folks here today from the music industry, both consumer-facing products and B2B, as well as some amazing academics and creative thinkers. So it should be a really good mix of perspectives because let's just say academia and the industry don't talk enough and we have very different views of AI, but we really should get aligned so that artists can flourish. Anyway, with that, I think I will start with DANI, if you don't mind. DANI, could you introduce yourself, say a few words about what your role is at the company you work at, and talk to us a bit about how you think about artists and tools. And we're going to do a somewhat pedantic exercise to look at those terms, make sure we're all on the same page, or just see how we differ.
I don't think it's pedantic at all. I think it's worth defining for the conversation. My name is DANI DEAHL. I'm from Chicago. I wear many hats, so for many, thank you. I'm a DJ. I am a music maker myself, music producer. I'm also on the board for the Chicago chapter of the Recording Academy, which is responsible for a little show you may know called the Grammys. And then day to day, my full-time job is working for a company called BandLab, which is based in Singapore. It is a music making app available on your phone, iPhone, Android, browser-based, all the places. And it allows you to not only create music, but to also share it with other folks, not just on the platform, but with the world. So you can start with your very first note and get all the way to distribution and have your tracks available on DSPs, all from this one platform. In terms of the way that we think about artists, I think that there is certainly artists with a capital A, and when I talk about that, I mean the Taylor Swifts or the Ed Sheerans of the world. But I also think the word artist applies to everyone. Being creative is a part of being human, and I think that we are all artists and we should not gatekeep that word. On BandLab, we see most of our users in that beginning part of their journey, so in the 0 to 15% part, I would say. And that is not any less valuable than someone who is a fully developed artist that is signed with a major. We see actually a lot of our artists begin on BandLab and shortly thereafter get signed to major label deals. In fact, one of those artists started less than 2 years ago on BandLab. His name is David. He got signed to a major label deal and recently passed 1 billion streams on the song that he created on BandLab, entering a very exclusive club on Spotify that includes only 581 songs. So I think that's how we define artists. And then in terms of tools, gosh, that could be another 10 minutes. I think tools for us are really, we don't need to think about that word or dig into it more than what we all understand it to mean. Tools are things that help you get to a destination. So we're really focused on creating functions within BandLab that help people in the creative process, but don't complete it for them.
Fantastic. Thank you, DANI. And next, Matt HENNIGER from Moises/Music AI. Matt, if you could introduce yourself, talk a bit about both your creative and your professional life. Well, maybe those things can overlap. That would be great. And then talk to us about artists and tools and all that fun stuff.
Absolutely. I hope you guys can hear me okay. Fantastic. Nice to see everybody. Hello from spring break in New Hampshire. Yeah. So my name is Matt HENNIGER. I'm VP of Business Development and Sales for Moises and Music AI. Moises is a consumer app that we just eclipsed about 45 million users that provide tools, what we call sort of complementary AI tools for practicing stem separation, slowing things down, speeding them up. And much like DANI, we see tools as a pathway to and to an end, right? We like to see these solutions present themselves in complementary ways for artists and their process to respect their art fundamentally. I My upbringing is as a professional bass player. I was at one point playing roughly 200 nights a year in Detroit. So I got my Midwest ties too. So we obviously stay very, very focused on that. And as far as supporting artists, as Tristan mentioned, there's sort of B2C and B2B components to what we're talking about today. We see, artist support, direct artist support in a B2C manner, sort of like the BandLab tools, right? It's sort of allowing the journey to start and complete. And then we also see sort of indirect support where AI can be helpful to the supply chain, for example, helping artists and find revenue, right, to expand the reach of lyrics and publishing, right? So there's indirect ways also that these tools can be helping artists even after the completion of the project. So, anyways, I'll hand it back to Tristra.
Thanks, Matt. Great. And now and now I'd love to hear from you, Chris. Could you tell us a little bit about who you are, how you, what you do sort of envisions artists and tools, and anything else you want to tell us?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Chris McMurtry. I head a product for a company called Artist Growth. Artist Growth is a project management tool like a Monday.com or Asana, but for music. I'm a classical composer, classical musician, and that's how I came into all of this. If you've ever tried to distribute classical music, it's quite difficult. And I was frustrated that there wasn't an option like a TuneCore for classical. And like a lot of, when we're young, we're quite naive. I was like, oh, well, we'll just build that, right? And so went to do that. And through that, my life's mission became, okay, data should never, ever get in the way of attribution or payment. And when you're the only person doing that for classical music, I guess you get to do stuff like this eventually, right? Yeah, that's how I got into this. As far as the tools go, so with Artist Growth's been around, this is our 13th year, and has been primarily B2B, focused on serving the major labels and the distributed labels of the majors. And that's been great. And it's subsidized what we're now doing, which is B2C, and making it so that if you're an artist, if you're a musician, if you're a composer, the last thing you want to do is think about tools, right? So that's where AI comes in, is it can do a lot of the thinking for you and a lot of the inference for you, and make it to where you don't have to think about data, you just focus on music. Less typing, more music, right?
Thanks. Yeah, that's an important tool that often gets overlooked in conversations. The tools that deal with metadata, that find patterns that have direct business impact on artists' careers. Wonderful. Now I would love to hear from Rebecca. And I don't want to butcher your wonderful last name. So
FIEBRINK.
FIEBRINK. Oh, that was my guess, so I should have just gone for it. And I love that we have so many different genres represented at this table. Rebecca, can you tell us a bit about your work and how you understand who the artist is, what these tools are, and even what AI is? Because I know that is something you've considered in depth.
Yeah, so sure. Is now a time where you want me to share the slides that I've got, or should I save
let's
those?
do that. Let's go
All
for
right.
it.
So I'm going to share my screen here. I put together some slides that kind of capture how I think about this space as an academic. And this is something I've been working on for nearly 20 years now. And I don't have particular thoughts that I want to share about like, oh, these are the tools that are doing it right, but rather, I want to encourage people to think about, if you're a musician, what are the pain points and barriers that you encounter? And also if you know something about AI, I think the exciting bit for us on the more technical side is to try to to identify what the exciting opportunities are to do something new. So I've got sort of four opportunity and pain solution areas that I just want to talk through. And through that, I think that defines who I'm thinking about in terms of musicians and other creators and the space that I am looking at tools that especially help people who are, making music in some sort, themselves. So the four ideas that I wanted to bring today are number one, this is something that is, I think, getting a lot of the media attention and not in an unhealthy way, but I think it's more than just this. But let's start here, which is the AI can help novices conform to a standard more easily, right? So many people have probably seen tools like, the Bach Chorale Google Doodle. There's all sorts of AI tools out there now that do a fairly decent job of generating music that goes along with some other music. So you could sing a melody, for instance, and then use an AI tool to give you a decent bass line or a drum track. There's a lot more than that, of course. There's some really interesting research, including work by my postdoc, John Gillick, who's been doing research on humanizing MIDI-like digital representations, right? So I have a MIDI track or I have, a drum machine track, and I can add more expressive timing and loudness variations to that. And of course, there's other tools in this space. If you've ever tried to do editing or mixing or mastering as somebody who doesn't really have training in those, you know that that's a big pain point. And there's tools like Isotope Neutron or Lander that do a reasonable job of getting someone who knows nothing about this to get music that sounds better, right? So this is exciting, but again, not, by far not the only thing happening. The next space I want to, get people thinking about is how AI can help people learn and practice music. And I do want to call out that this is something that has been an area of research at Indiana for a long time now. Chris Raphael really did groundbreaking work in using AI to generate responsive accompaniments. So if you're practicing a concerto, but you don't have an orchestra in your living room, you can still play and have some accompaniment with you, to rehearse with. Today we have even more powerful machine listening tools with the potential to give feedback on people's practice sessions. I think there's a whole interesting space to explore, even using ChatGPT like chatbots that might be customized to support music students' motivation, help structure practice sessions, encourage critical listening. I did a study with a PhD student of mine a couple years ago in which we had musicians jamming with an AI system, which was actually just a guy playing keyboard in the other room, but they didn't know that. And people talked about the power of playing with AI because they had like a safe space and they could experiment creatively without being judged. And I think that's a really exciting nugget about how people think about AI and how it might be creatively useful. A lot of my research has focused on how supervised learning, a type of AI, can help people build new musical instruments. So you can build an instrument from examples of what you want a performer to do, how you want them to move, as well as examples of the sounds you want them to make in response, or sounds you want the instrument to make. This allows people to make completely new instruments that make sounds we've never heard before. Also enables the creation of bespoke instruments by people with disabilities and by people without technical expertise. The last point I want to make here is that for me, one of the most exciting areas is around AI helping people explore and refine musical ideas. So if you've ever composed a piece of music, for instance, or really done any kind of art work, creative process, you know that experimenting, noodling, revising, refining are all really key to the creative process. And there's so many forms of AI right now that can help a person identify, explore, and refine alternative ideas and approaches more quickly and easily. So for instance, if you're making sample-based music, there's AI-based machine learning or machine listening-based approaches that help you find samples more efficiently so you can get on with it and do the experimentation, do the rest of your composition. If you are writing musical material, we have AI that can generate variations on a musical segment and suggest different ways of doing things, which might resonate with you or might get you thinking differently about what you're making. And here I think there's a huge opportunity to look beyond these sort of one-size-fits-all generative models that tend to get a lot of media attention and think about models that are trained on a composer's own works or trained on field recordings of sounds that people think sound cool, because these give us really great possibilities to explore and remix spaces of musical possibilities. So in a nutshell, right, my take on this is that AI is exciting because it can help us make completely new music and to take new approaches to music making. And so I just want to share a quote from a composer I've worked with, an instrument builder, really, Letitia Tsunami, who says, in a way, you don't want the instrument to perform like a well-trained animal circus. You kind of want it to be a little wild and you want to adapt to it somehow, like riding a bull. I think the machine learning allowed more of this fun of exploring. So I think there's, key questions that I'd love to talk about on the panel today about how AI could help us make music that we would never have made otherwise, and how maybe working with AI can change who makes music, how they make it, and how they feel about it. So that's it for me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rebecca. That's a wonderful whirlwind tour of all the different aspects of AI and how it might fit into music making and music experiences of various kinds. Now, last but definitely not least, we have Jordan here. Jordan, can you introduce yourself, talk a bit about your work and how you define AI tools?
Sure, and thanks for making me follow Rebecca. That's really.
Oh,
no.
I'm sorry, that was really, that.
No, it's a good setup. So I'm Jordan Munson. I teach music technology for the last 16 years at the Herron School of Art and Design in IU Indianapolis, just up north. But I'm also a composer and multimedia artist. And my work for many years has been kind of iterative process, trying to draw on lots of influences, but also just kind of the back and forth between the human and technology. So as AI starts to enter the picture, it was a kind of a natural progression just to integrate those tools into this kind of iterative process. And I don't know if, I sent it kind of late, I don't know if Talar has my email with a YouTube link. Is it okay if I make music in the music AI panel?
Go, make some music, please.
So I just, if it works out, so there's an early example of, I can't remember what year, but the use of AI in my creative practice. So I was asked to do a project for a thing called the House Light Project, where they make a kind of so they sort of take over an abandoned house and make it into a ad hoc community center. And so I created a sound art installation that was a large music box. So it was a kind of a tape pull-through music box. It went all the way around the room, but it was empty. And so the community would come in and punch holes in the music box. And so I've done a lot of sound art, and that was a great process because it's community-driven and really great results there. But I've done a lot of sound art installations up to that point, but a colleague of mine, Ben Smith, or former colleague of mine, Ben Smith, created a fantastic series of machine learning tools for Macs. And so what I had going on there was, as these new gestures, music box gestures were coming through, machine learning was kind of listening and identifying, is this a gesture we've seen before, or is this a new gesture, and would start to kind of categorize and trigger new kind of responses or new directions. And what I liked about it, and that's the first one, sounds return or new again. So what I liked about it is actually the organic sound, or the organic kind of evolvement of the sound. And I think that's something that AI is really starting to give us, is, moving away from these kind of, on the grid kind of quantized MIDI things that gives more options, more ability to feel a little more organic. So yeah, this is some sound if it works. There's a lot of levels of processing, and so the AI is identifying kind of new gestures, or it sees this as a gesture it's seen before. It'll move in kind of different directions of feedback, through different audio effects. And then what I've been liking about AI is, so this leads to, like I said, doing a lot of iterative processes, and AI has really helped to just kind of speed up that process because it's, for me, always been a pretty belabored process and years of iteration. But some AI tools help kind of move those ideas along a little quicker, I think. And so this next example is kind of that same idea. Actually, it's audio taking from that same project, but made into a pop song in a way, through about 35,000 iterations. And then some of the lyrics you'll hear are also early examples of, like, you know, cut up method, large language model things to create the lyrics. So for that other one, if you could jump like 2 minutes in. Yeah, that one, yeah. I should have had a fun presentation like Rebecca, but I'll give you two YouTube.
It's all good. No, it's totally fine.
Yeah, that's funny.
Don't trust, have faith. You are alone, dark to the sound. Oh, make me say how I feel about you, that this is how my heart should be. Tell me to be happy now, that I'm not the only one. No.
So surprisingly, both those things, oh, thanks.
I know. Maybe we should just have panels where people play clips. This is great.
Surprisingly, both those things come from the same source. And so, like I said, you know, the lyrics are kind of David Bowie, William Burroughs cut up method, and from a large language model. And I'm always so surprised at how emo those large language models are. Like, are you okay? Let's check in on them. But even the musical content, I mean, a lot of the same audio is put through lots of processes to turn it into that pop song. So for me, so when we talk about artists, I think about me myself as an artist and how I use those tools. But as an educator, I think this was brought up in Rebecca's presentation, but just like what are the levels of that? And I love the idea, and Danny, you talked about this too, of these artists like with the lowercase a maybe, or younger novice aspiring artists, and how these tools can really help them get into these things. Almost like back to the GarageBand days, where that was a way for people to get into this like so much younger. So that's really exciting. And then, yeah, the tools, it seems to be just another tool in the toolkit for me. All these things are just more things that could help us be creative and, again, kind of speed up the process or help us, as Rebecca said, maybe write music in different ways or create new and exciting types of music from these tools.
Amazing. So when you talk about iterations, what exactly does that mean for those of us, just to explain to us noobs who don't get to do this every day?
So I think about it like sculpture or like abstract painting, where you're adding on material and pulling material back away, and or another analogy would be like Xeroxing things. You get changes in the process, so it's kind of like that. So taking some piece of audio, maybe pulling it back, maybe adding distortion to that after it's been pulled back to fill out the spectrum of sound, and then pulling it back again, and then maybe gating things and sending it through different processes. It's just the worst way to work because it takes way too long. But I've always liked the results are things that I wouldn't come up with just on my own if I decided to sit down and write a thing. And again, like all these tools, especially things that we'll probably talk about today, like tools that are doing timbral transfer and those sort of things, are giving us so many new ideas and new things to kind of work with in this kind of iterative process.
Well, that's where I wanted to start our discussion today, is talking about some of these tools that aren't just straight up like press a button or enter a text and get a full-blown track. So let's start with timbre transfer. And this is something that's relevant to what you do as well, Matt. What do we mean when we, first of all, let's define timbre transfer, because it's not, it may not be obvious to everyone in the room. And how do you, what's the potential there? You want us to, who wants to take, Matt, do you want to dive in with this definition?
Yeah, sorry, when you're like looking down the panel, I couldn't tell if you were looking at me or.
It's hard to,
I got that.
I'm staring you down through the ether.
Oh, okay. Yes, happy to. So, I mean, we look at timbre, like vocal timbre transfer is really what we focus when, and some projects that we have, and I can talk about a couple of the applications that we've seen of it, but really it's about taking the timbre of a voice and giving it to another one. And we have, what we've run into is the misconception of like that type of transfer versus cloning, right? Like taking someone's voice. And I think that's a big misconception in the space about how that works. And I like to describe it as a digital switching amplifier. Anyone that I speak to who, when you wanted to sound like Eddie Van Halen and you wanted that 5150 sound and you turn the knob, you still need to know how to play. You're right. Like it's still your performance underneath it, right? Although that tone, that tonality exists. So when we look at vocal transfer or timbre transfer, it's the same thing. We can move the characteristics of a voice from one person to another, but fundamentally that performance is owned by the new artist, right? So we've seen it in a couple of interesting ways. We added that functionality into our consumer app. And the thesis there was actually, we thought it could be an interesting new revenue stream for singers. Fundamentally, was licensing out their models. And so what we did is, as a test bed, is we created 11 high quality vocal synthesis models, and where they're licensed out for a one-time fee. So whatever that is, called $50, and you and an artist can issue a perpetual license to your model. And we're then giving 100% of that as a pass-through to that artist. So, and the idea is, if you were to do that, you have 1,000 people license your voice. And by the way, we're seeing it much more in the creative application and not the production application. This is like, I wrote a demo, or I'm a songwriter and I want to change the timbre of the voice so I can pitch it, right? Or I'm a producer and I've been told I need to do a vocal stack, a harmony stack under a lead. I can sing it all myself, and then I can put it in there and it becomes sort of in the mix, right? And you fill out the sonic space, but it's not taking that final production step. We're seeing a ton of application here. And we've taken it as far as we've actually worked with some of the major labels. We're seeing it as a post-production tool, which has been really interesting. So there was an artist based out of Brazil that was Leo Santana is his name, and he did a live performance and under Universal, and they do a show, and then he's off and running, and he's on tour. He's gone. And as I think probably most musicians in the audience know, I mean, live performances don't go great. The microphone gets too far away from you, forget the lyrics, you're dancing, you've got this 90-minute performance. It's not going to be clean out of that microphone. So what they did is they proactively made a voice model of the performer from the microphone that day. So we had how he sounded. Was he nasally? Was he open? Was it the mic? All that sort of thing. So you build essentially a microphone specific model. And then he went out on tour, and his production team could then come in and fix every single mistake that they saw in that performance. And so essentially his producer sang the parts, put it through his own, who is artist model at his request. And then, as that microphone drifted and they got too quiet and it came back, they were able to fix these kind of little iterative things throughout the performance. You watch it, you don't know, but it actually allowed them to release it on time, and because he was on tour and they couldn't book it. So we're starting to see kind of really interesting, you see the creative side of it, but then you're also seeing sort of cost-saving post-production ideas here, again, so it doesn't have to be perfect that first time. You now have an expanded toolkit, again, to get to market and distribute. So that's been very interesting to watch.
That's super interesting, and the creative aspects are still there in that post-production world, right? So I'm imagining the same transition as auto-tune made, where auto-tune became an effect that you could have. Maybe we fix half the mistakes, right? Maybe we fix the mistakes in a way it's obvious we fixed them. It could be all sorts of interesting things. Rebecca, I really want to ask you about these instruments. Looking at your presentation, and I'm really glad you gave us the visuals of those incredible instruments. What kind of models or AI tools help people create new instruments? How do you spark that creativity in an artist?
Yeah, so this has been a big part of my research since about 2007 or so. So I got really interested in AI really in part because I was surrounded by experimental composers who wanted to make new types of sounds that nobody had made before and to make new types of stage performances in which people were moving in ways that you don't typically see in a music performance and using that to make the sound. And it turns out, not using machine learning, yet people have made new instruments without machine learning for, 50 or maybe 70 years now. But it's really difficult because you have to at some point sit down and write some code and say, well, these are the sensor values coming in, and these are the ways that I want to change the sound synthesis parameters. And it just gets to be a lot to manage, even if you're an expert programmer. So I did my PhD in this area, really thinking about could machine learning be a tool to help people do this? And I ended up building a piece of software called Weckinator, which is still used today. It's, had about 50,000 downloads. And so the instruments that I showed on screen were, first one I think was Michelle Nagai, who had this great piece of tree bark. In this tree bark, there's about 25 light sensors. And so that's getting information about how she's casting shadows over the bark with her hands. And then the middle picture was Letitia Tsunami with this amazing instrument called Spring Spire, where she's got 3 vibrating metal springs and an audio pickup attached to each one, but you don't hear the sound of the springs themselves. She's actually doing some processing on that, getting, bandpass filters and looking at the frequency content of those springs to just get really fine-grained instantaneous information about how she's touching them and plucking them and so on. And in both of those examples, all you need to do to make an instrument with Weckinator, which is what both of them have used, you give examples of, all right, here's how I want to move, and here's my sound synthesis parameters that I want, how I want to control something in Max or Super Collider, for instance. And so that, for me, was the foundation of my PhD, and I became really interested in okay, what does this mean for the creative process? And started digging into questions that were really foreign to me as a computer scientist, where you think about machine learning as a tool for finding patterns in data and making sense of data. And instead, I started to think about machine learning as this tool for somebody to explore sound spaces more efficiently, or a tool for somebody to bring a more embodied sense of their musical self to the creation process, where you're not just sitting there and thinking as a Max programmer or something okay, where are my boxes and how do I connect them? But rather thinking about how do I really want this to sound? How do I want an audience to perceive this? So again, that, ended up in the Weckinator tool, which people can download and check out. There's a bunch of other tools out there now. Flucoma is a more recent thing that is for Max and Super Collider folks. There's, JavaScript tools that people can play with. This whole idea ended up in Google's Teachable Machine, if folks have tried that. If you haven't, I definitely recommend it. You can just make a classifier in this style, immediately and make, something really simple that controls sound in a few minutes in your browser. So it's been a pretty successful approach for that type of instrument building and saying, hey, can I make something new that allows someone to move with sensors and make some cool sounds we've never heard before?
I love that, and in some ways it's opening up music making to people who may not, again, who aren't thinking inside those boxes and parameters directly, but have a much more kinetic sense of what music is and what it does. And there's so many traditions and lineages on planet Earth where music is highly kinetic. And yes, I love that we could possibly bring some of these things together in new ways. And that made me think of you, DANI. I'm sorry to, DANI. No, in that your BandLab and the work that BandLab is doing is also trying to unlock creative potential for folks who may feel like they don't think of themselves as musicians or music makers or producers. And one of the tools you have on BandLab is called Song Starter. Can you tell us a little bit about how that works and how that differs from just, press a button, get a full-blown track?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the really interesting things about music as a creative discipline is that it does require a certain level of knowledge in order for you to feel successful. It's not like drawing where you can doodle and that's fine. It's not like sculpture or pottery where you can make something. It might not look great, but it's functional. But with music, you really have to have this additional language or at least a basic understanding in order to have something that doesn't sound dissonant at the end. And so we focused on tools that can enable people that don't have this language whatsoever to feel successful and not have to go through this arduous process of having to learn music theory and all of the language that comes along with it. So Song Starter is a tool where you tell it a prompt, and that prompt could be, you could throw it a bunch of emojis, you could throw it sample lyrics, whatever you want, and give it a parameter for a genre, and it will give you 3 basic ideas. And those ideas are meant to be okay and not great. That's the whole point. If you find something that resonates with you, you can then choose it and open it in Studio, which is our DAW, the digital audio workstation. And it will give you 4 layers of MIDI. Very importantly, that MIDI is only going to be 4 bars long, so it's not like you can take that and immediately export it and go monetize it on Spotify. It's really meant to be an idea and something that you can start with and iterate from. But it solves a lot of problems, not just for people that are new to music, but people who are also experienced musicians, because very often we are faced with writer's block and you want to be creative, but if you don't have an immediate idea or don't really know where to start, sometimes having something do the beginning work for you can really help to get you in that flow state. I will say there's a reason why we call it Song Starter and not Song Finishers, because we really want it to be a place of inspiration for folks and be a point of service to people no matter where they are in their creative journey, how experienced they are, and their level of interest in becoming a musician.
Yeah, so this is interesting that I love that approach, that it's not going to finish it for you. It's starting the song. I mean, it goes to the whole tools thing. Like, a tool is there to assist and help you do something. It's not there to do all this, the whole process for you. And Matt talked about this too, I think with, you still need to be, like with the timbral transfer, it's still your performance. And I think about when people get all nervous about AI, like, I could own, Jimi Hendrix's guitar. I cannot play like that. And it's still just a tool at the end of the day. And the same thing probably for that tool, different levels of professional musicians using it will produce different even starting points for songs and things. And I think that's really, really fascinating.
Yeah, there's no way to sound like Eminem if you don't have Eminem's flow, even if you have his timbre, right? So, all right, and one really important aspect about for artists is what happens after I get to the finish line, and what do I, after I put it out in the world. And Chris, I would love for you to speak a little bit to that. So if any of you have taken any classes or been involved in the music industry, if you want to make anyone in the industry cry, say the word metadata. So the layer of data that talks about what a track is, who wrote it, sort of its origins, and it is a very, very difficult problem that the industry has been trying to solve since digital music became a thing. You have a lot of experience in that, Chris, both at your current job and at PEX, which I don't know if we want to go into what PEX is, but helps identify musical works and is part of a very quickly evolving ecosystem that helps people find music and track it down and attribute it to the right creators. Anyway, what are some tools that you think people need to be thinking about that relate to data, attribution, royalty admin, if you want to go in that direction?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. As far as PEX, I'm sure everyone's seen what's happening with TikTok and, modified audio being taken down and things like that. That's all PEX, right? So PEX's superpower is the ability to identify content, whether it's been sped up or slowed down or chopped or and whatnot. So that's extremely important because, you know, if somebody is using your content and monetizing it because they modified it, you know, sure, there's a creative aspect that they applied to it, and maybe they should get part of the royalties, but you should get the royalties as well. So that's PEX. As far as the metadata piece, part of what I love about, you know, what we're talking about is the lowering of a barrier entry to creativity, right? I think Meng, who's DANI's CEO, said, hey, by 2030, I expect there to be 1 billion creators in this space, right? That's 1/8 of the population, right? Yeah. So extremely exciting, but also the potential for a lot of noise, right? You know, so that's where metadata comes in. That's how you cut through the noise, is being able to be identified, be able to be recommended. And so some tools that come to mind, and several of the panelists, their tools already do a lot of this stuff, is like auto tagging, right? You know, taking an audio file, not audio file as in I really, really like music, but a file that is audio, and dropping that and basically being like, hey, this sounds happy, and here's a description of everything, and I think it would be great to be used in these use cases, right? So that's one piece. Another is tools that that allow it to infer data about you as a creator so that you get credit, right? It's like, hey, are you the same Jordan Munson that did this, this, and this, right? And you're like, yeah, that's me. Cool. We have your IPI from ASCAP. You want us to just populate that for you? Yeah, that'd be great, right? So you know, that is also really, really important. And I mentioned this in the panel yesterday. There are over, when it comes to metadata, there are over 1,400 variations of the name Tchaikovsky, right? You know, so AI is used to resolve and be like, yep, this is all Tchaikovsky, right? You know, over 12 versions of just Jay-Z in the marketplace, right? You know, so like, these are great uses of AI that allows the artist and the creator to still be creative without the fear of, hey, is attribution still going to happen? Am I going to get credit? And am I going to be able to get paid for that? So.
Amazing. Thanks so much. And I also think there's some interesting stuff happening on the back end with metadata, and actually uncovering, like, I don't know if everyone knows this band SAULT, SAULT. They were really mysterious. They didn't do any interviews. They had no bio, and somehow it got connected to the production team behind it, and so everyone kind of found out who they were, which is kind of, so maybe it'll be, a mystery might be banished, but people might actually get paid for their work, which is kind of perhaps a good trade-off. All right, you know, there's a lot of interesting potential use cases, so I'd love if everyone could get a little bit sci-fi and maybe talk about some emergent qualities they're seeing in some of these models or tools. You know, as we were talking about, Matt, with timbre transfer, are we starting to see some hints of where some true creativity could be unlocked the way it was with electronic music tools? Do you want to, you're grabbing your mic. Do you want to start, Jordan? I would love to hear your perspective.
I'm ready to get in there, but I don't
yeah,
need
let's
to start.
do it.
Well, I mean, for one, like, when Matt's talking about, when we were talking about timbre transfer and voice to voice, I always think about, and Rebecca brought this up at the end of her slides, like how to break that tool or how to use it in a certain way. So things like, it's a model, you know, of some kind of voice, you know, someone's voice, maybe a bespoke model of like one artist. What happens when I play saxophone through that model? What happens when I do something that is more percussive through that model, that has like maybe full spectrum things? So those kind of things, I think we'll get some very interesting things out of that. I know there's a paper by Isaac Smith here over in the other room, and rave models, doing kind of like real-time timbre transfer, which is like, again, you have a big model. How many hours did you use, Isaac? 4 hours worth of flute music. So a big model, and then in real time, kind of auto encoding and pulling from that model with some kind of input. So I think that's kind of interesting. Just kind of how can we? Those are some emergent qualities I could see, like for experimenting with sound. Yeah, and then things like self-organizing maps, the way people are using like neural networks for huge collections of samples and organizing those into a map, which I was using a bit of last night, but it's just, I think there's some interesting things that could happen with making these kind of synaptic connections between points on a self-organizing map of samples, and all these kind of new sounds that we can get out of that, that are emerging.
I love too that we can be getting away from this linear or hierarchical organization of sounds. If you think about how you use a DAW, right? Instead of it being this kind of very regimented thing, it could be this more amorphous thing you could move around in. I don't know. I don't want to get too crazy, weird sci-fi and like have a hallucination right here, but.
Well, you brought up kind of the block too that creatives get, and like, the organization a lot of times for samples is alphabetical.
Yeah.
So just organizing it in a more creative way and looking at these samples kind of on a map. There's a tool called EXO, which also uses kind of a neural network for drum samples. And it's meant for drum replacement, but it's really cool if you don't use it that way. It's similar. Like you can creatively move between things. So I think it helps to kind of break through some of that writer's block a lot of times, that creative writer's block.
And not just writer's block, but specifically in electronic music, we doom scroll samples a lot. So any AI that could help me get to an answer that I would have not normally arrived at would be very helpful.
Yeah, and I wanted to just see, Rebecca, I also feel like we need to bring back the safe space idea in here, and this idea of having a companion to bounce ideas off of who's non-judgmental and maybe non-human. So we can't predict them. We don't know who they are, really. We have to understand through conversation. I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about what you've seen in those safe space experiences, and have musicians had breakthroughs or new directions that they've pursued because of them.
Yeah, and again, this was a short.
Oh no! All right, we'll get back to you, Rebecca. I totally want to hear what you have to say. Matt, meanwhile, I wanted to also ask you about the B2B aspect here, meaning how might the more commercial side of the business use some of these emerging. Oh, okay, we'll get back to B2B in a sec here. Rebecca, can you keep on going? Sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I was going to say I would love to do more studying of this. I think, in the study that I mentioned, people were really encouraged to improvise, right? And to jam. And that's something that, if you've ever been a human improviser with other people, that, it requires this trust, right? If you're really going to go and try something really new. And people felt like even, immediately, without knowing much about this AI, without knowing what it was musically capable of, they were, finding that out as they went. Even within a, 15 or 30-minute session, they were able to try out ideas that they didn't feel like they had the courage to try out with another person. And, I see this certainly also in a lot of the ways being reported about people's use of ChatGPT, right? People are using ChatGPT as like a therapist. We could, talk about maybe that's not such a good idea given the data protection policies and so on. But I think, there is a sense of, okay, I'm not going to be judged by this system. And I think there's huge potential to say, okay, that's a baseline. Now what could we add to that? What kind of musical intelligence might we add? Or what kind of, even propensity to ask you questions about your own work and get you to reflect on your work might we add to this kind of system? Or what kind of training on your own musical material might we make? And I think there's also related really exciting questions about how we encourage people to think of, AI systems. Again, the sort of main, narrative that we see in the media is AI as maybe not, exactly a human, but as, sometimes a proto-human and sometimes a superhuman and on the way to being a singularity. And that's one very narrow way of thinking about what an AI is. And I think it's an open question of how should a musician in a creative, collaboration with an AI, how should you think about that? Is it another musician? Is it a teacher? Is it a student? Is it, your DAW? Is it a sort of funhouse mirror version of yourself? I think there's all these different analogies that are worth exploring.
I really love that, and the fact that we could start to harness other models of intelligence, kind of in scare quotes, to help us understand how to be better humans, or how to be more how to take our humanity in a different direction. Now that we've talked about these amazing philosophical, beautiful concepts, Matt, I'm going to bring you in to talk about the industry, because there's some very interesting things being experimented with right now using AI models. For example, taking a track that's successful and translating it and actually making the vocals fit the original, instrument bed. Those kind of things. Can you talk a little bit about the more commercial aspects of these emergent qualities, of these just developing capacities of AI?
Absolutely. I think we're seeing kind of a fork in the road between sort of democratization of the technology that we've started seeing, like stem separation, lyric transcription. It's almost crazy to think about, but they're almost old. They're commoditized. Like it's what exists now. I mean, on the stem separation side, I mean, what you used to be able to pull out, drums in quotes, and now we're already being able to pull out kick, snare, hi-hat, tom. There are models now to separate lead guitar and backing guitar. There are models, lead vocals, right? So all of a sudden you're starting to see almost a commoditization of that, right? And I think that what you're going to see is a democratization of that as it goes into different market segments. I think you're going to start to see a push into embedded solutions. I think things that are now on the cloud, they're going to get optimized and they're going to be local. So I think you could think about speakers in your pocket and Bluetooth, and starting this technology, you're going to start to see it proliferate quickly, in my opinion, as those processes can move offline. I think you're going to see a lot on the localization piece is gigantic. Everyone that we're speaking to is in some way trying to figure out how can I, to your point, Trista, can I take a song that was a hit in a certain market and move it? Initial feedback on that from our side has been it's touchy. Look, there's a real connection to a piece of music and a composition and the language and the tonality. And I mean, I think anyone in this room knows, right? I mean, the connection to a piece of music is beyond language. And I think that we have to be very sensitive and artistic in that approach. I personally haven't seen that work in a way that my ear doesn't go a little wonky, where I say, no, like that's not, I don't care if it's Freddie Mercury in French. No, right? Like I can't, right? My brain breaks. I can't do it. However, I have seen really interesting applications with like advertising, like bumpers, right? Like I want to, I just released this new record. It's playing in the background. Come see me at a local venue on tour, right? Like the ability to take a model and say, okay, I'm going to take that artist's voice and I'm going to instantly localize 30 versions of that bumper instantly at scale, right? So that I'm speaking to different markets as I tour, can be done. And there's no visceral reaction to that artist's voice speaking a different language. It's the singing. It's that connection that seems to be. Now, it can be done. You can take a model. What we've seen be successful is you hire a local singer as close to sing a version of that song, and then you can port the model of the singer to the top. So you end up with localized version, right? The timbre of the original on a new singer. We've seen success there, but again, this is a new version. This isn't scaling. This isn't hitting a button and getting 50 languages. This is still very artistic. So we are seeing a big push there. There's some questions about how to do that. And the other thing that Chris was mentioning too about playlisting, right? Getting to new content. What we're also starting to see is like extracting metadata from a track has been around for a long time, right? Echo Nest, you go far enough back. I mean, that's just sort of how, and there's been a big debate about whether or not that's like expanding or restricting what music you see, and you're fighting a computer, right? what we have started to see is you can now take some of these technologies and put them sort of in like ahead of tagging. So like we've seen some work about like a concept of cinematic stem separation, where you would remove the dialogue from a movie and sound effects. So you end up with the underlying music. Okay. Now you can listen to it and start to infer mood, style, theme, emotion. In the same way, if you stem separate prior to a track, you can now start to draw conclusions about the bass part, about the drums, about the guitar, right? And now all of a sudden, I think your ability to playlist, to not be doom scrolling, to not be going A, B, C, D, D in your sample, like I think you're going to start to see new connections be created between like pieces of content, because you're now going sort of at a deeper level to go look for those metadata tags.
That's really interesting, especially with the way listening is happening now. And if the youngest listeners are very genre agnostic, they're not siloed the way us old Gen Xers are. And it's really cool to see. I mean, it's cool to think about like, okay, this is a house piano line, but this bass line is more like Afrobeat, Fela Kuti inspired stuff, but we could put it on this playlist. That's really, really exciting. Chris, you want to say something?
I just want to say, can we all agree to kill the genre?
I would love to do that, yeah. All right, it's genre died today. We just need to mark that forever. So Chris, just building on that, sorry, gonna make you talk more. I'm curious how you see like the future. How could we get sci-fi with metadata using AI? What are the possibilities? Again, maybe going beyond the recommendation algos that everyone has been very skeptical of nowadays. And you can get as speculative as you feel right here. But I would love to hear your thought about what having better metadata connections could do for music making and for artists in the future.
Yeah, sure. It's hard to not talk about metadata without getting boring, right? So I'll try. But one of the things that comes to mind is if somebody wants to remain anonymous, right, like Salt, right, then you can, and the reason is because metadata at the end of the day is just a hash, right? So I think so. Nick on the front row here works in metadata a lot and is part of DDEX, and the biggest problem with metadata is in linking the master recording and the publishing, right? With this technology of AI, that is theoretically not needed, and here's why. Is because if you have a series of hashes, let's just call them a fingerprint, right? And that fingerprint is able to identify unique audio, then why do you need an ISRC code, right? That the fingerprint is the code that points to that, right? And that's why somebody would be able to remain anonymous. Like I mean, how many? So I have two daughters, 17 and 14. They listen to a ton of music, including David, by the way. So they're a big portion of their streams. But if I were to be like, cool, what song is this? I don't know, right? They don't know the names of the song, right? Like even the name is less important than it has been because of these emerging technologies, right? It's just like, do they know the name of the artist? Yes, like you still have that infatuation where you know what you like, right? But it's this way of thinking around, I have to get all of these pieces in line before it can be released. That's less important now, right? Not saying it's not important, it's just less important. And so like, I in an ideal world, not only when it comes to metadata, not only is the artist not having to think about metadata and, I don't know, how would I describe this, right?
Yeah, like the DIY release thing where you're just like, it sounds like the Beatles,
right.
So there's like all this very confusing
and artists are
metadata.
horrible at saying what they sound like.
Yeah.
It's like, we sound like this. Well, you may have been inspired by that, but it sounds nothing like that, right? So, yes.
Amazing. And Danny, I would love for you to talk about what you're seeing at BandLab in terms of sort of things that suggest intriguing developments in the future or potential for how AI might continue to help creators that are new to music or don't consider themselves musicians.
Well, I think something that everyone on this panel has touched on is what could music creation look like if we broke down the traditional formats that we're all used to? How can we reimagine what a DAW looks like? How can we reimagine what writing a melody looks like? How can we reimagine synths? This is not my product, but one synth that I really enjoy that breaks this mold is a plugin called SynPlant. That if anyone, do you know about this?
Oh, my students talk about it a lot.
It's fantastic. The reason why I like it is that you aren't given a myriad of knobs and parameters. You start literally with the iconography of a seed, and you draw out from the seed and you pull out shoots, and every shoot that you pull out changes a parameter of the patch that you're creating. So if you want to, you could go underneath that dashboard and see the DNA of the plant that you're growing. But otherwise, they try to tap into it being an intuitive process for you and really just have you focus on what you're listening to. And so I would like to see more reimagining of tools that don't ascribe to the physical representations of the tools that we already have and we have had for 50 years, 100 years, et cetera, et cetera. Now, one of the challenges that presents is that professional musicians are not really keen on that. So while it opens up a lot of opportunities for people that don't know how to make music, we hit a wall with professionals because if we don't allow them more of that granular opportunity to design or to interface with tools that they're very well versed in, then there is the assumption that it is a toy. And so right now we're in this unusual in-between where there's a lot of development to make music creation more accessible, but how do we make it so that we have professionals also understand that it is equally as powerful for them as it is for the person who has never made a song before?
I think we need to maybe open up our hearts and minds to toys. Get back to playing music. All right, I can tell that it's time for some questions. I'm curious how I can get some questions from the Zoom feed too, but I guess we'll figure it out. Oh,
yeah,
awesome.
Well, just to let everybody know online that we're going to have a question from the room, and then we'll go to somebody online. If you're online and you have a question, raise your hand. Go to the bottom of your screen there and raise your hand, and we'll come to you.
Yeah. Do you want folks to come down to the mic so the remote audience can enjoy too? Awesome.
So wonderful panel. Thank you all so much. One view of AI as a tool is that the tool itself doesn't change what people do with it, or it doesn't change the function of the tool. But another view is that the tool itself changes what is possible to do in terms of a social function of music. The things that people wish to do or accomplish with music. The tools that we have change what it's possible to do, not just in the sense of like what we make, but what music is for. And I wonder if you agree or if you think that that is the case, or in what ways AI as a tool actually changes the function of music in a social sense.
I actually quite agree with that, because the commercialization of music is a relatively new phenomenon in the history of humanity. And before 150 years ago, music exclusively was a service. It was a part of culture. It was a part of community. And so I think the democratization of these tools and AI serving as a function to allow more people to enter into this experience is opening up additional avenues for music to once again become part of community and a service and a way for people to connect that don't have higher aspirations of being a professional artist.
Can I add to that? Sorry. I think
Of course.
That's spot on. I also I want to say one thing that we're seeing that has been a surprise is it isn't, not only is AI not groundbreaking in sort of what Danny was talking about, right? In the accessibility, the democratization of it, the community of it, but we're also seeing this big push backwards into rediscovering older music and practicing. I mean, the numbers are always sort of mind-boggling to me that Moises is fundamentally an app to practice traditional instruments, guitar, sing along, plays drums, play the bass, right? And we've gone to 45 million users. There's 45 million people practicing with essentially traditional instruments on these compositions. And I've seen it when I've traveled a bit. I mean, unpacking songs from the 90s and hobbyists and slowing it down. Right? So I do think that like it's been interesting, and as a musician, as someone who's put my time in on the instrument, it's been inspiring to watch someone pick up a Green Day song from 30 years ago and just with a grin from ear to ear because they can finally play the part. And you know what? They're going to go buy that next amp and they're going to go practice some more. And the next song's going to be a little bit harder. So I don't know, like my music brain, like it smiles, right? When I go, man, like you're just more connected to the music that I loved. You've put some more hours in on it. That's a beautiful thing to watch.
Amazing.
It's amazing, yeah. So anybody online? Chase, do we have anybody? Okay, so let's go with the next.
Not currently, no.
We'll go with the next question here in the hall.
Hi, thanks a lot. I love the positive vibe that we're getting on all of these panels, and I really want to thank my friend Alan over here for putting this together. It's a really amazing conference. And I'm here to represent boomers, by the way, you said Gen Xers. So I guess I'm going to, say what everyone is thinking here. As the developers and the minds behind these technology, I really feel you have a responsibility to be the gatekeepers as well. And I just want to throw out a couple of examples that kind of scare me with AI, and I would just love to hear your thoughts on that. The first, we had the mention of auto-tune a little bit earlier. It is an effect, but it is mostly a crutch. I'm an audio engineering professional, and I know that. And as an example, on Instagram, an isolated vocal of Michael Jackson came across. Wow, listen to Michael Jackson with no auto-tune. So that kind of, this crutch kind of becomes what's expected. And, being in the Jacob School cheapens all of the hard work that the musicians are putting in to learn how to sing in tune, to some degree. And I'm speaking in extremes here, so please understand that. Second is, I think of, for example, the SAG-AFTRA strike, where there was discussion of replacing background actors with samples. So when you were on a film, they would sample you, and then they could use AI to build the background, the background scenes. It limits work for actors, and I can think of the same in music. I used to work in jingles in Chicago. Background singers all the time. Now with this technology, you can create reasonable background voices to fill in, and putting the background singers out of work. So while there are incredible opportunities that are being created by this, and I just love the idea of democratization of music making and bringing that to people, it also is going to have a very, very significant impact on the way music is made and on the income streams of people. So I just wonder if you could speak a little bit about what you see in the future, but what is the responsibility of those making AI to address these particular issues?
Okay. I thoroughly agree. I don't think that any of us are here to say that there isn't a nefarious side to AI and what we're talking about. I do also agree that it is the responsibility of developers to think about in 10, 20 years' time, what are the actions that we're taking now so that we can be on the right side of history, right? And that is a reason why last year BandLab became the first music tech company to align themselves with the Human Artistry Campaign. And the Human Artistry Campaign is a set of tenets that is agreed upon by over 150 organizations, including SAG-AFTRA and the MPA and the RIAA and the NMPA, that says that human creativity should never be replaced by artificial intelligence, right? It should always work alongside it. So we always operate with that at the forefront. And on the other side of the coin, I do think that in terms of job replacement, production music is unfortunately at the top of that list. I do think that we're already at the point where it can be created pretty easily. And I was just on a sync panel at South by Southwest last week, And everyone on the panel frankly said, if production music is 100% where you get your income, you should start looking at diversifying that income right now. So that is the unfortunate reality. Taking off my BandLab hat for 1 second, also a couple of weeks ago, I was in Springfield, Illinois, testifying before our House and Senate there for an amendment for our Right of Publicity Act to include protections for musicians in case their work is infringed upon through the use of artificial intelligence. So there is work that is being done at a legislative level to think about all of these potential outcomes that I want to say can happen, but are already happening, right? So there definitely is, there's a side that you're talking about, and it is being worked on by everyone on this panel in various ways, and unfortunately there are some people that will feel the effects of that greater than others.
And just to speak to what Danny's saying, there's some federal laws that are for rights of publicity. There's a lot of discussion in the Copyright Office right now about how are we going to translate the realm of copyright, and we had a panel about that yesterday, but it's a very, very important issue that's being taken really seriously, which is kind of wonderful, because I feel like the music industry, in the Napster era felt like, wait, no one's fixing, how are we gonna, what's going on? There were very few levers to pull. The other thing is cultural, right? We, as people, can make a decision about what kind of music we would like to listen to or make. And a lot of younger people, I know that the vibe, like if you just listen to the mainstream media, man, I don't mean to get too conspiratorial, but the rich control it, and they are telling us what they want us to do, which is to do what they say. However, if you ask most Gen Z, and I'd love to hear your take on this, Chris, and younger kids, they're really into analog stuff. They're like fascinated by cassettes. Going to a live concert blows their mind. They're really, I'm wondering, are we gonna see something like the Romantic era where we have a reaction to all of this very mediocre, pre-digested content, and there's gonna be, the equivalent of the slow food movement, vis-a-vis industrial food production. So it's in our hands. We can do this, and everyone in this room probably has lots of skills they could bring to this discussion to help make music benefit from these things, but to limit the fallout. All right, sorry, I don't want to take the time.
No, it's all good. It's great. Go ahead.
Just real quick. I have a bit of a contrarian view on this. I think if we were, I've taken surveys in similar places like this, and I'd love to do the same here at Jacobs, but if you ask the musicians at these schools, like, hey, how many of you, you're 15 years old and it leads you're passionate about the violin, or you're passionate about composing, and you end up at Jacobs. When you were 15, how many of you were saying, hey, what I want to do is I want to write 5 seconds to 30 seconds of music to be used in a Cheerios commercial? Like, none of them said, yes, that's why I'm doing this, right? So what I imagine is a giant tapestry of, like, there's gray threads and black threads and white threads, and then there's this bright pink thread in that tapestry that will always stand out, right? And I've been to more concerts, like, in my more recent years than when I was a kid, and when I was well, not when I was touring, because I was the concert, but all that to say, like that analog is very real, and as far as people's jobs being replaced, I think that there will be those who don't use these tools will be replaced by those who do use the tools, right? But I do think there's still a very, very real need for greatness in this space.
Fantastic, and we'll let the panelists online respond to that as well, fold it into the next question. So feel free to, maybe what we'll do is we'll ask the panelists online to answer the next questions. Next question.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, fascinating discussion. Let's see, I was thinking about what I sort of want from AI tools as a composer and a software engineer. So I was thinking about, like, I'm like an amateur composer, and my one of my first composing teachers said he got into composition just because he wanted to write more music that he liked to listen to, because it wasn't out there. And I really relate to that, because I'm really into musical theater and some like Baroque, early music, but there's not more stuff coming out, especially like early music. Or in musical theater, it takes forever for a new show to come out, right? So I think one of the most successful things I've still heard in many decades is like maybe Dave Cope's work from Emmy. I'm not sure how modern things are doing at sort of creating larger structures of things more in MIDI style. Like I really want systems that can create musical scores and have some sort of depth and complexity to them. I'm just curious what people think about how sort of recent advances in AI help for composition at sort of large scale.
Rebecca, do you want to take that? We're gonna
Sure,
give it up to
I'll take a first crack at that. I think it's still there's many open research questions there, right? What contemporary AI is really good at and really good at getting attention for is, hey, I can generate a 30-second or maybe a 90-second snippet of structurally quite straightforward music, and it sounds sort of like timbrally cohesive, and it sits inside some kind of like, genre or like kind of cultural landscape in a semi-recognizable way, right? As soon as you start saying, okay, I want something that's going to or God forbid, over, 45 minutes or hours, if we're talking about opera or musical theater, like it's not going to happen. What I will throw in there is to say, number one, I know there are lots of people working in this space that are trying to combine the sort of data-driven approaches to AI that we see in contemporary deep learning systems with really old-fashioned rules-based expert systems. Hey, how do we take what we know that we learned in music theory class, or what we know when we studied, these particular forms, and put constraints on systems that generate music? There's a company based here in London called DASI, which is doing some really interesting stuff around generative music that is using, a lot of that approach, and I think doing cool things with it. But on the same, in the same space, that's one of the things that my collaborators and I at the Creative Computing Institute are looking at, where you say, okay, we've got generative models which are really good at really local structure. They're really good at making cool sounds. How do we then not automate the large scale structure, but bring in that human expertise and human creativity to drive that larger scale, right? Where you could step back and say, well, here's maybe how I see a structure happening, or here's how I'm going to perform on stage to move through that structure expressively. I think there's just, really fun possibilities there.
All right, I think we're sadly at time. Thank you, everyone, both in the room and online. It was a great.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. What an incredible conversation, and thank you to the panelists and to TRISTRA.